seeing? Well, I'd have to say that there is finally at least in my space, which is marketing, advertising agencies, PR firms, design firms, digital firms, there is finally a global awakening that's happening in our space. Early on, a lot of the consulting work that I did was with mid-sized independent firms. Now the majority of the work I do is with the global multinational agency networks. So there are about 5 big holding companies that control 85% of the global spend in marketing. All 5 are now clients of my little firm. So there's a sea change finally starting at the levels that we hoped. That's the biggest trend I can see.
And we'll just keep going with that for one more moment. Can you maybe just contrast that to what you're seeing in other professions, and if it's different, about why that might be in your view?
Yeah, I'm not nearly as plugged into other professions other than what I know from my VeraSage colleagues. I'd have to say that my perception is that the law is making some pretty big inroads, particularly here in Australia. I have a collection of headlines from the Financial Review and other publications, probably compliments to Joan Chisholm, a lot of them that I use in my presentations very often to highlight that, because the firms I work with are always interested in, as it's human nature, well, who else is doing this, or the other professions making this change. I've done a little work in architecture and occasionally a few accounting firms and IT consulting, thanks to Ed Kless. I would have to say that my impression is that it's happening maybe a little faster in my sector than other industries, but I don't know for certain.
Look, I primarily work with the accounting industry, so accountants and bookkeepers. I think from an innovation perspective, what we're seeing is this huge push towards technology. So we're being disrupted in our industry by all this technology. And I think what people are missing, people are so caught up in, I've got to learn this app, I've got to sell this app. High touch is the solution, not high tech. You know, somehow along the line we've lost touch with the fact that it's about how we connect with our customers. It's about the value conversation that we have. We don't have the right to put our prices up until we have created and captured and delivered more value for our clients. And I don't see enough people talking about that. I think that's the big kind of elephant in the room, if you will, from my perspective. The other thing I noticed, so I was in QuickBooks Connect. So I just presented at QuickBooks Connect Global Conference. And of course, Ron was there as well. And he spoke about the subscription model. And it was really fascinating because he was talking to everybody in the room and everyone was just, you know, sitting on the edge of their seats taking in his pearls of wisdom. And then someone at the back put their hand up and asked the question that nobody else wanted to ask, but they were secretly thinking. How many other firms are doing this? Are any firms doing this? And Ron, as he did, you know, as he does, he just kind of chuckled, right? He said, no. No one is currently doing this subscription model in any significant way, but that is exactly why you need to be doing it, right? It's about differentiation, right? We can't value price something that is highly undifferentiated. So it's about how do we drill down, how do we create bespoke solutions that immediately disqualify our competitors. That's what it's really about, and I think that's where we need to be focusing.
Thank you so much. Maybe we can come back down. Oh, no, we'll start with Patrick. How about you? What are you seeing?
So from our point of view, and we probably 80% of our work comes from legal firms and quite a mixture, is that we work in the digital tech space, for those who don't know who I am, and of course, you know, in that space, of course, I'm particularly old. John's making me feel young today, by the way, with all his VeraSage colleagues, so I appreciate that. And we find that digital is really just a bit of a cop-out for firms who are really seeking to innovate. So what we would be seeing with firms is there seems to be a desire, and there will ultimately be a desire to invest very heavily in digital, because that's the low-hanging fruit, of course. But I think what firms need to do is think about their behaviours and also the preferences of their clients as well. And fortunately, because we also work with some other stakeholders of legal services, that is some of the tech companies that we advise and provide product, and also some of the clients of law firms, we get to sit on the other side of the table as well. And so we often hear the conversations of what is a timesheet, particularly out of Asia. They just don't get that concept, of course. And then, of course, the way that firms bill as well. So we would say that by all means, give us money so we can help you digitise your enterprise, but do it in a way where you go into that with the right sort of behaviours and values.
Thank you so much, Adrian. Tom, I'll come to you.
I'm probably coming at this from a little different perspective, is that I'm a solo. I've been a solo for 7 years, and I made a promise to myself when I started that I would never fill out another timesheet. But it's kept me somewhat isolated. I have my clients, I work with them on a daily basis, and I do have the subscription model that's been the foundation of my practice since day one. And it's life-changing in many ways. What I'm surprised at is that every day in my email I get, well, almost every day, and sometimes I get 2 or 3, the latest and greatest legal technology solution, and it's always about how to capture more time, how to more effectively bill your time, how to turn your accounts. And it tells me that in the United States, at least from my limited perspective in Richmond, and it may be different in other cities, we haven't really made a dent yet. And the United States, the bar associations of all the United States and the National Bar are still really, really entrenched in the billable hour mentality. And when I was in the tech world, I was in a tech company that I co-founded for about 7 years, which sadly ended in 2001 with some big buildings falling to the ground, as among other things. And I came back to law saying, I'm going to change this. I'm tired of paying 6-figure legal fees and not getting anything, no real value other than a few pieces of paper with some time entries on it. And I thought, well, gosh, I've created this company, we built it up to a certain point, and it's going to be easy. I'm just going to come in and tell these law firms that I'm now working for, because I had to come back to law, this is how it's got to be. And every single one of them, 4 in a row, great idea, let's do it, and then didn't follow through, couldn't possibly change the way they thought about it. So we've got a long way to go. In the tech world, we had a saying, you really don't need a strategy, because if you don't do one, your competitors will do it for you. And the truth is, that's likely what may happen to the United States legal industry. Is we're starting to see, whether it's LegalZoom or whether it's the major accounting firms with large legal departments, increasingly doing cross-border legal work or quasi-legal work that's being farmed out to these quasi-legal entities. And unless the firms finally get in front of innovation in a really fundamental way, not just with the latest technology piece to put on their computers, but really to get out there and change their business model, it will be taken away from them in a very large extent. And if you don't think that a large industry like that can crumble, think again. Look at long-distance telephone. Look at all the different things that have just completely gone away in the last recent decades. I was a partner in a firm in the early 90s in Richmond that rapidly grew, mostly after my exit, to be one of the largest firms in Richmond. And it was all based on billable hours, and it was all based on more leverage, more hours. That firm in the last few months has totally collapsed and is now in liquidation. I think it's just a harbinger of what's to come. We've seen LaBeouf Lamb, or was it Dewey, Ballantyne, or a couple of big firms, Howard and Simon, big firms in the United States that were built on this mantra of billable hours have simply collapsed. And I think it's just the taste of things to come. So I'm really looking forward to, well, for one thing, innovating more tech into my solo practice to empower me, but changing the fundamental nature of what I sell, of what I provide, so that, yes, it'll be subscription-based and it'll be other things, but it won't be just that standard one-on-one practice model that is so limiting. Whether you bill by the hour or whether you bill by value, it's still limiting if it's tied to individuals. So we have to get off that platform, if you will.
I might come back to you in just a moment, maybe leverage on a couple of points, but maybe, Rhondalynn, if we come to you. With where are you on the spectrum? And maybe we should probably get everyone's view on this in terms of... How come they all laughed? It was a very momentary pause. Were you on the spectrum of the Daniel Susskind view of the world that, yes, technology is the answer to everything here, but this time it's different? And this time, actually, all of us are actually out of a job because the technology will just take over everything.
Look, interestingly enough, just a couple of months ago, there was a survey released, and what they measured was partner pay, or partner profit in the firm before partner pay, and they tracked it for 5 years. It dropped in Australia for accountants from 42% down to 25% in the last 5 years. So if you extrapolate that for another 5 years, we're looking at sort of 10, 11%. That's not sustainable. So from a technology perspective, I'm very much, I don't really care about the tech. The tech to me is a diagnostic tool. It helps you get your stuff, it helps you get information, helps you get things done. It doesn't fix the problems that keep your clients up at night. It doesn't help them to achieve desired transformations. The most powerful app in the world sits between your right and your left ear. We need to engage it.
Tim, are you more pessimistic about that? Particularly, as an outsider not knowing anything about your industry, it seems to me that the power of the technology there to totally annihilate your industry is strong.
Yeah, definitely. This is the disintermediation of everything. The disintermediation of professional services, where we're actually, all of us are in two different businesses. We're in the I love these terms because I think they're so memorable, magic and logic. We're in the magic business, which is the problem solving, the innovation. This is the high value work where your expertise comes to bear against a client problem, where we offer high value custom solutions. But we're also in the logic business, which is the easily done, widely available, contract review, tax returns, in my business, production work that is being outsourced, done in-house, done by technology. So this is where technology comes to bear. Our problem, I think, our economic woes in professional services are explained, I think, by our unwillingness and inability to draw this line between what's magic in our firms and what's logic. We've got to make our margins from the magic work, and we've got to stay as magic as we can. In my business, in many firms, 80%, up to 80% of their revenues, and this is from some of the large multinational firms, 80% of the revenue comes from logic type work. This is the work that is under the most intense price pressure, that's almost impossible to make a margin on, that's being insourced, outsourced, in-house. So that is economically unsustainable. So this applies to all of us here today. What is it how can you do more magic and get paid for it using innovative pricing technologies and methodologies like subscription model and many others is the key to our future.
And Patrick, before you do answer your question, you're part of the problem, right? Because you're enabling, on one view, you're enabling...
Correct. I think that's one way of looking at it. But I guess you've also got to consider whether the trend is your friend. And the question I want to ask Tim was, is the magic drying up, or is the magic always going to be there?
Yeah, it's always there. It's a constantly moving line. If you turn the clock back in the days of Don Draper, if everyone knows who that is, that's Mad Men. You've watched a few episodes. Virtually everything an ad agency did in the 1960s was magic. Clients had no in-house capabilities. They couldn't do anything for themselves, and so agencies were highly profitable, 30% margin average businesses. You fast forward to 2019, the average global profit margin in my business is now just above 9%. And a lot of what's behind that is the failure of firms of all sizes to follow that constantly moving line. There's always magic. We've just got to keep pushing ourselves back into that territory and resist the idea that somehow we can make it up on volume by doing lots more logic. If you want to be in the logic business, you better find a way to do it very, very cost effectively with a much different cost structure. It has a completely different pricing structure. I think that most of the value pricing methodologies that we know and love apply only to the magic side of the business. The logic work has to be, that pricing has to be simplified, and unit pricing makes more sense there, where you're actually in a situation where you have to compete on price. My view is that we need to do as little of the logic work as possible. And I've worked with a few firms that have completely turned around their business model, where they used to be very dependent on logic. That was the majority of their revenue. Now they make the majority of their revenue for magic, and they're wildly more profitable businesses.
We've got about 30 minutes to go. In terms of taking questions from the floor, I think that there's two pathways or two options, to use the right term of language. One, if you want to write it down and just type a piece of paper, and I'll run around and grab that. Otherwise, if you can just stick your hand up, we won't throw it because that technology is broken on us, but we will bring the mic around to you. So, ideally, wanting to get questions from the floor for the balance of the session. Before we get there, one more for you, Tom, but we wanted to pick up again on two of your points. One, you said, I don't know exactly what you said, but you said a substantial part of your business is subscription. What sort of percentage would you put on that?
It's easily 50 to 60%. And then the rest is special projects. So my subscription engagement agreement lists a quite long list of different types of issues or documents or tasks that I will undertake for this subscription price on a monthly basis. And then it very clearly says, if anything comes up that's out of scope, it's on me to identify it as such. If I don't identify it as out of scope, then I can't charge you for it.
So how is that, to be devil's advocate, how is that different from a retainer?
Well, a retainer, I mean, historically, and the Virginia bar is a little bit picky about this, they don't let me call it a retainer, because a retainer is an amount that you keep in your escrow fund, in your trust account, to be charged against as you complete specific work. So a retainer is something that can be replenished on a regular basis, and then it has to have some metric, for lack of a better term, against which you decrease it as you complete work. Whereas my subscription model, and I think it's probably similar to many, is you pay me at the beginning of the month, and use it or lose it. I mean, if you don't have any problems that month, well, maybe it's because I did a good job last month. If you do, then by all means call me right away. And I do occasionally get some pushback. I have adjusted my subscription pricing from time to time. Generally speaking, it's only been upwards. I have yet to lose a client outright from a subscription engagement. I've had some say, well, we've been a little slow lately, and then all of a sudden something happens and they need me. What I think I don't do a very good job of, and I'm looking in some respects to technology to help me do this, is to reach out more frequently with capabilities that I can add to this platform that increases value by giving them more functionality. It's great to be able to call me and I'll solve your problem if I can, but it's also better if I have a platform that allows you, for lack of a better example like LegalZoom, to do some things yourself in a curated way that allows you to reduce your legal risk. And I'll be the one that helps you decide where that legal risk is and how best to reduce it and what technology we're going to bring to bear to do that. But that is where I become the curator of the platform as opposed to the actual doer of the logic piece. Prefer to be in the magic business.
Perfect. Questions? Thank you so much. Oh, Jennifer, thank you. But I was going to make the threat that John's running an algorithm up the top there, and if you don't ask a question, your chances of being hand-picked for a debt talk go up exponentially. Jennifer Dixon.
Thanks, Matthew. I'm trying to get my head around what seem to be somewhat incongruous concepts in terms of focusing on the magic work, thinking about the concepts of value pricing, pricing the client, looking at the circumstance, and how that then potentially fits into your subscription model, which I interpret to be flat-lined over whatever period.
Is that for me specifically?
Anyone?
Let's see, so maybe I'll rephrase the question. What is it about subscription pricing that fits with the concept of being in the magic size? Okay. Yeah, it's hard to put your finger on it. I'll give you an example of what I consider to be what empowers the magic side. okay? And this is a strange example. It's got nothing to do with law, and I'm not trying to claim that I'm clairvoyant or anything. But years ago, I was listening to a radio program in the morning, and they had this trivia question every day. And the trivia question for that morning was, what state of the United States, what capital of that state shares no letters with the name of the state? And instantly, I mean, I didn't have a conscious thought of even trying to calculate. I just said, pure South Dakota. And it was right. Now, why is that? Why can you come to a conclusion that's correct without even consciously thinking of it? It's because there's another part of your brain, and that part of your brain is informed by all of your experience, all of your training. I mean, if I hadn't been drilled on state capitals when I was in 3rd grade, obviously, I wouldn't even know that it was pure South Dakota that was the capital. But that was all back in there somewhere. And your brain is doing that kind of work all the time. So when you have, call it a hunch or call it a, an insight, what have you, to me, those are the things that can really drive the value to your client. Because if a client calls up and says, I've been told I need to do a private placement memorandum to do this and this and this and this, and I go, no, you don't. I just save them ungodly amounts of money and time and effort and whatever, because if I say there's a better way to do that, or you don't need to do it at all, or who told you that, that can make such a huge difference. And that's what I consider the magic part, as opposed to, well, here's how we do it.
Rhondalynn, could we maybe come to you? You've written a book on value pricing 1.0. Where are you at? And sorry, someone had their hand up here. We're trying to make my way to you. Where are you on value pricing 2.0?
Look, I think where I'm at is right at the beginning, where we always should have been. I go to all these conferences and I hear people asking questions. How do I get paid what I'm worth? My clients are price conscious. It's all price. Drives me wild. The price is irrelevant. It's about the value. We should be focusing 100% almost of our time and energy on how do we create and capture and communicate value for people. And to me, that's what it's really about. How do we skill ourselves more adeptly at having these value conversations with our clients? Because that is really where the magic is. From an accounting, so I'm a lawyer and a chartered accountant, but I primarily work with accountants. But in our industry, we've got this thing about compliance is over here and advisory is over there. It drives me wild. At the end of the day, those should have never been two different things, right? We should have always been providing holistic solutions for our clients. And in fact, prior to the desktop computer showing up in the 80s, we were doing that because we were in control of everything. So this isn't our first rodeo, right? We've been through massive disruption before. And that disruption caused us to get stuck in compliance. This time we're in charge. And it's about how do we holistically go into the engagement with our clients, not thinking about how many people they have with their payroll or how many bank accounts we need to reconcile. It's like, why is this person in pain? Like, how thirsty are they? I talk about this in chapter 1 of my book, right? There's a difference between someone who's got 3 screaming kids in their backseat, they're all thirsty, and you've got to stop at 7-Eleven, you've got to buy water, and a person who's crawling across the desert in 40-degree Celsius heat, who hasn't drank anything for 48 hours, and they're going to die if they don't get a glass of water. We need to figure out how thirsty are our clients. What would a glass of water be worth to them? These are the conversations that we need to be having, not, how many people do you have that I need to do payroll for in your organization, or, what's happening with this information memorandum that I need to draft for you so that you can raise capital. That stuff to me is like your ticket to the game. It gets your foot in the door. It's stuff you have to do to earn the right to help them with the stuff that's really keeping them up at night.
That's right.
Matthew, could I have a dubious crack at just responding to that as well? So I would suggest have a look at Microsoft. So I would imagine that probably everybody in this room is using Microsoft software. And at our conference, our tech conference about a year ago, we had the general counsel from Microsoft come and sit on a panel and tell us the story about how Microsoft moved from being a pay for the license company to a subscription service. And what was interesting about that story was the transition that had to be taken within Microsoft itself. Years and years ago, I used to curse Bill Gates and Microsoft, and if I could have got all the time back that I spent on their products, I think I would have been a very wealthy person, especially if I could charge like lawyers do on their timesheets. But these days, the market view around Microsoft is very much a trusted provider who is concerned around civil rights, and we're happy to host our data with them, etc., and we're happy to pay our fees. So they've had that value conversation, but most importantly, they've done the hard yards to think about, well, as an organisation, we used to remunerate based on sales. We used to remunerate based on licence sales. Now we remunerate on how customers feel about us, net promoter score that David was talking about the other day, and so forth. So if you look at that journey, I think that's very powerful. There's an article about it at a very high level in The Economist, I think in August this year, in the Shumter column. Joe Shumter, a very highly regarded economist, takes the name of that column, and they talk about how it was led by the General Counsel at Microsoft. And it goes all the way down where they've said, really, we want to be an ethical provider. Now, that's a very big change, and I think that's perhaps one of the ways. I mean, it's about having that moral fortitude to go about doing that.
Can I just add one little tiny thing? We also have to remember that in a traditional value pricing sense, we're pricing the client, we're pricing the outputs, right? We're not doing that in the subscription model anymore. We're pricing the relationship. We're basically buying a lifetime annuity with that client. They're two totally different things.
No pressure. We've been given the word. We've got less than 2 chargeables. What would you like to say? We've got about 10 minutes left. Tim, you were going to say something?
Well, just some examples of things that would lend themselves to the subscription model. Back to your question about the magic. We've done work with firms, and one in particular, a PR firm in Perth, that took competencies they already had and service lines they already have, and found ways to package them in more imaginative, valuable ways, and in effect productized what would otherwise just be off-the-shelf services. You can subscribe to a cyber breach program from this firm called Canyons Purple. You can subscribe to a crisis communications program. You can subscribe to a social media community management program. So one way that you can look at subscriptions is to look at the constellations of competencies you've got in your firm, and how can those be packaged together in unique ways and productized, in effect. Option A, option B, option C. You look at you can choose which is going to work best for you. They have different levels of service and deliverables, but they've been able to monetize much more effectively services that otherwise in the past were sold by the hour. I think we have an aversion in professional services to productization because we like to think everything is completely custom and unique, but there are lots of things in our firms that can and should be turned at least into programs and sometimes products.
We've got another question here.
Could I just add something real quick?
No, we're going to go here.
Okay.
I've got a question for you. So.
I'll take the question.
Thanks, Tom. So I don't mean to be trite, but much of what you're talking about is a relationship of trust between you and your client, which is personal by the side of things to your client and you. Where do you find magicians to scale, and how do you introduce those magicians to other potential clients?
Yeah, I have no idea, and maybe that's why I'm still a solo. I mean, my problem has been to find people that I feel I can work with who get it and who fully subscribe, pardon the pun, to the notion of value pricing. In the last year, I formed another firm with 2 individuals. One's left, and it was the idea of bringing value pricing to a fractional general counsel market for firms bigger than I usually work with. And the day doesn't go by that I don't have to still continue to hammer on my partner and say, stop thinking about how much time that took. Stop thinking about what that would have been in hourly rates. It's so hard to change someone's mind until they want it to be changed, until they need it to be changed. And so I don't really know. I mean, it's difficult. I mean, if David Copperfield, how does he replicate himself and become the David Copperfield enterprise as opposed to just David Copperfield doing a show? I don't know. It's very hard. So I think it'll be in the same sense that when I was starting my practice in 1983, computers at the desks of lawyers were extremely rare. And by the time, say, 1995, 98 rolled around, most of the law students coming out and working in firms that I had interactions with had learned everything on a computer. the research, the writing, etc. And so it just doesn't happen overnight. So there will be a gradual transition. I don't think it's going to be a tipping point and a break point.
For those, and we might, as we're closing out, if each of you could maybe give a perspective on that question, and also answer the question, if your businesses are 100% subscription at the moment, what percentage are they, and where are you heading on your journeys in that regard?
Was that for me?
Well, I think,
No, I already
I think we've had the
answered.
answer from you, but I'd like to know, I mean, we're hearing, is it practice what I say or practice what I preach, being the devil's advocate question?
I wanted to, hi, this is Dan Morris. I wanted to talk about the magic, finding the magic, because we've been stressing with that, and we found currently a concept called, it's a self-administered test called the Colby-A, and I've only found one person who said it never had any applicability to her, and she was incorrect. It absolutely did, but her weaknesses was she couldn't see it, and it tests your instinctual thinking, and everybody gets 100%, so if you take the test, it's just right because it's your instincts. And what I found out is in an accounting firm, they measure 4 things. They measure your ability to be a fact finder, on all these are scales of 1 to 10, and your ability to be a follow-through. In other words, how good are you at actually doing what you said you're going to do. I'm poor at that, by the way, just ask Baker. Your ability to be innovative or a quick starter. In other words, once you know enough, can you go down the road, and then finally how do you implement these processes? And
What's the question?
Well, I was going to explain how we found them. So by giving the people the tests, we're finding out that the people who are stronger in quick start, this innovation capability, tend to lead to more magic. And accountants tend to be very fact-finding, but very slow at the ability to drive further because they don't have enough facts. So some of these tests, what I'm suggesting is an answer, is some of these tests are ways that are tools that give just analogous methodologies to say, where do we find people who are, my words, nimble? Because that's where magic comes from.
So interestingly enough, there have been a number of studies, neuroscientific studies around this. And what the scientists have discovered is that the brains of people who are traditional managers, whether they be a lawyer, a doctor, an accountant, they actually think and operate differently than people who are quite innovative and entrepreneurial. And because of the way that our brains work and neuroplasticity, all of these skills can actually be learned. So just because you were born or you think that you're stuck being just a traditional lawyer or an accountant doesn't mean that you can't learn these skills. You can. But they must be learned and developed over time. And there are many things that you can do. I've written several articles on this exact topic. But the heart and soul of it is, if you're looking for people who have a propensity or might want to create magic, you can actually train them to do that. It's not something that people are born with. It can be learned over time by anyone.
One very, very last question.
Oh, well, it was more a comment. My experience for successful finding those people is start with somebody who's completely new to the business. I hired an MBA who had an accounting degree and had never worked for anyone. He'd been a bartender. It was actually a VeraSage thing in Napa, and he was serving us beer. He said he had trouble finding a job in accounting, and I said, well, you're talking to the wrong people. But he'd never been in it, and so he joined my firm. We don't do hourly billing, don't even think that way. And he's never thought that way. So you didn't have to unlearn any of that stuff. I mean, I had to, with Baker. It was pretty brutal at times. I spent 2 years tracking my time after we dropped the wow. It was that brutal. But this guy just caught on because it's like, no, this is the way you think. And he never thought the other way, so there was no unlearning. So I'd encourage you to look for new graduates, really sharp. This guy had some really odd educational background, pure liberal arts, had to do a dissertation for his bachelor's degree, which was outrageous from, I went to UC Berkeley, he didn't do that kind of thing there, because there's thousands and thousands of people, but he went to a real small school. So he's kind of this oddball that nobody else was going to hire because he didn't fit that, gee, this is, the local or the regional accounting firm, and we're looking for the guy who went to a named university. He had this different thing going on, but he didn't know anything about traditional accounting firm time tracking and that kind of whole mentality. So he was a fresh, what I call the uncarved block, and it worked out great.
Are you John Chisholm at the Geelong Cats, or are you Ed Close at the Mets? Make a decision and then use that as inspiration to thank our panel.